Right, ready to dive into color.
Always.
This was going to be especially interesting for you, as a philosopher.
Oh, how so?
Well, because we're basically tackling how color, something we see and talk about all the time, is actually a total philosophical brain teaser.
I'm intrigued already. Where are we starting?
Our main guide is the Standard Encyclopedia Philosophy's entry on, well, color. Makes sense.
Solid source. Okay, so what's the puzzle here?
We learn colors as kids, right? Sky is blue, grass is green, simple stuff.
Seems straightforward enough.
But what if I told you that this whole basic idea of color clashes big time with what science tells us about the world?
Okay, now you've got my attention. It can't be that different, can it?
Oh, it is. The scientific view, and we're talking centuries of research here, says color isn't actually a real property of objects. Like, it's not out there the way we think it is.
Whoa, hold on. So my blue coffee mug isn't actually blue. Where's the blue gone then?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's not exactly easy to answer.
I'm ready for it. Say it on me.
Well, even David Hume, that super famous philosopher way back in the 1700s, he was onto this. He said colors are perceptions in the mind, not qualities of the objects themselves.
So Hume's putting color in the realm of thoughts, not things.
Yep, pretty much, and that idea has stuck around.
Interesting.
Like even today, people like Stephen Palmer, he's a big name in this stuff, he says color is a psychological thing, happens in our visual experience, not a physical part of objects or light.
So are you saying that if I see a red apple, the apple itself isn't actually red?
That's the implication, yeah. And that's a tough pill to swallow for anyone who thinks what we see is a correct reflection of reality.
It certainly challenges a lot of assumptions, for sure.
For sure. But think about it. Our whole language is built around color, right? Red apple, green shirt. Are we just completely wrong in how we talk about it?
It's not about being wrong, exactly. More like it raises Og's questions about what's real and what we perceive.
Yeah, perception versus reality, the classic philosophical dilemma. Weren't Descartes and Locke all over this too?
They were. They had this idea that color, as we see it, might not be in the physical world, but objects have the power to cause certain color experiences in us. Call them secondary qualities.
So the object itself isn't colored, but it can make us see it as having color. That's a subtle difference, but I get it.
Right. It's a bit like a chili pepper. It's not inherently spicy, but it has the stuff that makes us feel the heat.
Ooh, that's a good analogy. Or like a battery isn't electricity itself, but it can make electricity happen.
You got it. That's the core idea. So the big question is, if colors aren't on things, what are they? And if they're just in our minds, how come we all seem to agree on what red or blue looks like?
Right. If everyone's seeing something different, shouldn't we all be disagreeing about colors all the time?
That's the philosophical puzzle. And believe it or not, even the pros who study color, they often start with those simple terms like red and blue.
So they're trying to figure out what color is, but using language that might be based on a misunderstanding seems a bit backward.
It shows how deep color concepts go, even in philosophy. There's this guy, C.L. Hardin. His whole color analysis is built on those everyday terms. Then there's Mark Johnston. He calls color a cluster concept, built from shared beliefs about colors.
Okay, cluster concept. I like the hand of that. What kinds of beliefs are we talking about?
He lists 5, but the one that might really catch your attention, philosopher to philosopher, is this. There's 2 ways to talk about color: inclusively and less inclusively.
Inclusively versus less inclusively. Okay, I'm curious. Break it down for me.
So, speaking inclusively, the world isn't actually colored. That's what he says.
Hold up. A philosopher saying the world isn't colored? That's kind of a wild thought.
It is, but speaking less inclusively, he says, we might still say it is. It's about how we define things, how precise we want to be.
Okay, this is getting deep fast. We're talking about how we even use language to describe something as basic as color.
Exactly, it's all connected. But before we go full philosophy on this, it might be good to get a sense of the main color theories out there, kind of a roadmap for our discussion.
Love a good roadmap. So what are the main contenders in this whole color debate?
Well, first up, we've got primitivism. This one sees color as simple, just basic properties.
So like red is just red, no further explanation needed.
That's the gist, yeah. It fits with how we experience color, but it's got some problems.
Okay, primitivism, I'm filing that away. What else is on the table?
Next, we've got reductive physicalism. This one argues that colors are complex, but still physical, scientifically discoverable properties.
So this one's all about the science behind color perception.
Yep, leans heavily on that. Then there's dispositionalism, which is a bit trickier. It says colors are powers objects have to make us see them a certain way, but only under specific conditions.
So it's not that the object is blue, but it can make me see it as blue.
Exactly. Then there's projectivism, which suggests we kind of project our color experiences onto the world, like the color isn't in the object, but we're putting it there ourselves.
Sounds like that one could lead to some pretty heated debates.
Oh, it definitely does. And then we've got subjectivism. This one says color is purely in our minds.
So a totally mental thing, nothing to do with the outside world.
In a way, yeah. And finally, just to make things even more fun, we have hybrid theories, which mix and match bits and pieces from all those different approaches.
A little bit of this, a little bit of that, trying to find the perfect explanation for color.
That's one way to put it. So, want to start with the most intuitive view, primitivism. It seems simple, but as we'll see, it's got some serious philosophical hurdles to overcome.
All right, let's unpack primitivism. You said it's the view that colors are basic, irreducible properties, right?
That's the core idea. Think of it like redness is just redness, period. It makes sense on the surface, matches how we see things, but philosophically, not so easy.
Okay, what makes it so hard to defend philosophically?
One big issue is what we call the causal role problem. Basically, if colors are so basic, how do they fit into everything science knows about how we see? How do they actually make us experience color?
So it's not enough to just say red exists. You need to show how it interacts with our eyes, our brain, the whole shebang.
Exactly. And there's another issue, too. This one's about how different people see things. Jonathan Cohen and Hardin, they both point out that if color is just this inherent thing, how do we explain why what looks blue to me might look different to you? Or even to me under different lighting?
Right, like sometimes colors look totally different depending on the light. If it's just a property of the object, that shouldn't happen.
Exactly. That's a big problem for primitivism. It tries to be simple, but our experience of color, not so simple.
I'm starting to see how this whole color thing is way more complicated than it seems.
Oh, yeah, it gets deep fast. Which brings us to the next big theory, reductive physicalism. This one tries to use science to explain color in a more, solid way.
All right, let's shift gears and check that one out. This is the view that colors are complex, scientifically discoverable physical properties, right?
That's the one. A modern take on this comes from philosopher Brian McLaughlin. He uses a functionalist approach, basically arguing that red is whatever consistently makes things look red to us under normal conditions.
So it's less about what red is and more about what it does, like how it works in our vision.
Exactly. It's trying to find the physical stuff that leads to us consistently seeing a particular color. This view tries to explain things like color constancy, how a blue mug still looks blue under different lights.
Right, because my mug isn't changing its blueness when I move it. It's something about how it interacts with light.
Right, and that something would be things like its reflectance, how it absorbs and reflects different light waves.
So we're focusing on the physical processes that make us see color, but didn't you mention something called multiple realizations earlier? That was a challenge to this view, right?
You're right, it is a challenge, and a tricky one.
Remind me what that is again.
It basically means a lot of different physical things could lead to the same color experience. Like there's not just one surface that looks blue. Lots of different materials, textures, even how light hits them can all make us see blue.
So how can you say what blue is if so many different things cause it?
That's the big question for reductive physicalism. They try grouping similar reflectances together, but even that's problematic.
What's wrong with grouping them? Seems like a decent way to organize things.
Problem is there's no clear way to do that grouping without making choices. Philosopher Edward Averill points this out, like, how do you decide which reflectances belong together? What's the rule?
So we're back to subjectivity, even when we're trying to make color scientific.
Yep, it creeps back in. And Averill brings up another good point. Even if we could group these reflectances, how do we define normal observers and standard conditions? What even is normal?
It seems like every answer just leads to more questions. Maybe we need to consider something more radical, like the idea that colors aren't actually real in the way we usually think. What about this color eliminativism thing?
Now that's a path worth exploring. It might be more nuanced than it sounds at first. We should dig into that, maybe in part 2 of this deep dive.
Okay, so color might not be as real as we think. Color eliminativism. It's a wild idea, I gotta admit.
It definitely makes you think, huh? But before we jump to conclusions, color eliminativism isn't saying color is totally meaningless or that we're just imagining things.
Okay, good. I was worried we were about to say goodbye to the whole world of color.
Not quite. It's more about questioning whether color is actually a property of objects. Like maybe they don't have color in the way we believe.
So my coffee mug isn't actually blue. Then what's going on when I see it as blue?
There are a couple of things to remember here. One, color eliminativism can still say objects have stuff that makes us see color. Like, the lemon isn't yellow itself, but it has whatever makes us see yellow.
Right, like that secondary qualities thing. The object isn't colored, but it has the power to give us that color experience.
Exactly. And this leads to point number 2. If eliminativism is right, it needs to explain why we're all so good at using color words. If colors aren't really out there.
Yeah, that's what gets me. If we're all just making up colors in our heads, How can we all make up the same ones?
That's a question philosophers have been wrestling with for ages. One way to explain it is through the projectivist account.
Projectivism, right. Remind me how that works again?
Basically, projectivism says we project our color experience onto things. So the yellow of a banana isn't really in the banana, it's your experience of yellow that you're putting on the banana.
Like my brain's making the color and then kind of slapping it on the object.
That's a good way to visualize that. And this whole projection idea, it can explain why our color concepts work so well, even if the colors themselves aren't really in the objects.
But if we're just projecting color, doesn't that make our whole color experience kind of fake?
It does suggest there's some error involved, yeah. But fake isn't quite the right word. Think about visual illusions, like that one with the two lines, the Muller-Lyer illusion.
Oh yeah, those things mess with your mind.
They do, but even though we're tricked, those illusions can teach us how our vision works.
So by figuring out how we're tricked, we actually learn more about how we see things in general.
Precisely. Same with color projection. Even if it's not perfectly accurate, it helps us understand how we make color concepts, how we recognize stuff, and how we move around in the world.
So even if colors aren't real in the strictest sense, they're still useful because they help us deal with the world around us. It's like a helpful story we tell ourselves, even if it's not literally true.
You're getting at a really important idea, which leads us to color fictionalism.
Fictionalism. Now that's a word that makes a philosopher nervous. Are we saying the world is made of fiction?
Color fictionalism takes things a step further, yeah. It says colors aren't just not in objects, but we should keep using color language as if it's true, even though we know it's not literally accurate.
So it's like we all agree to play along with a system, knowing it's not 100% real, because it just works.
It's a pragmatic view, like saying, look, the world might not be colored in this objective way, but pretending it is helps us understand it and get stuff done.
As a philosopher, I'm torn. Part of me loves the practicality, part of me hates the idea of accepting a lie, even a useful one.
It's a tough one to swallow, I get it. But think about language itself. Words are just symbols we use to represent stuff. They're not the things themselves.
Yeah, the word tree isn't a literal tree, it just stands for a tree. We all agree on that.
Exactly. And fictionalism says color words are like that. They're tools that help us communicate and understand, even if they don't perfectly match reality.
I could see how that frees us up to focus on how color works in our lives, without getting hung up on finding the true color of things.
It's a different way of thinking about it, that's for sure. But not everyone buys into this eliminativism, fictionalism thing, of course.
I bet there are tons of philosophers who would say, hold on, our experience of color is real. It's not just a made-up story. What are some of the arguments against this view?
Well, one big objection is that it doesn't fully capture how intense and vivid our color experience is. Saying that the feeling of awe when you see a sunset is just a projection, it just doesn't feel right.
It's like saying a symphony is just sound waves. It misses the emotional part, the beauty of it.
Exactly. And that brings us to another major color theory, one that takes our inner experience more seriously, subjectivism. This view emphasizes what it's like to see red or blue, the feeling itself.
Okay, subjectivism, let's hear it. How did this one explain color?
It comes in two main flavors. First, there's the dual referent theory. This one says that color words, like blue or green, they actually refer to two things at the same time.
Two things. Okay, I'm listening. What are they?
On one hand, they refer to what we experience when we see that color. So like the blueness I experience when I look at the sky.
Right, that inner personal experience of the color.
Yep. But those same words also refer to whatever property in the object is causing that experience.
So the blueness I see is tied to something in the sky itself, even if that something isn't literally blueness as we usually think of it.
That's the basic idea. It's like saying the word pain can refer to both the feeling of pain and to whatever injury is causing that pain.
I think I see what you mean with this dual reference thing. What's the other type of subjectivism?
The second one focuses on how our color experiences actually create our color concepts. Christopher Peacock, he's big on this view.
So it's not just about seeing red, it's about how that seeing shapes our whole idea of what red even is.
Right on. And this type of subjectivism, it can be combined with realism or eliminativism about objective colors. It can say they exist out there or not. But either way, our subjective experience is what really matters for how we understand color.
Interesting distinction. So even if the world isn't objectively colored, subjectivism says our inner world of color still matters. It's what gives our color concepts meaning.
Precisely. Which brings up a question that you, as a philosopher, might find particularly interesting. How are color and shape related in our experience?
Oh, that's a good one. I've always felt like you can't have a color without a shape. It's like redness can't just float around. It needs to be attached to something.
It's a very intuitive connection. Brian Cutter, he's a philosopher who argues that this link between color and shape challenges the whole idea that shape is objective while color is subjective.
So if color's subjective, maybe shape has to be too.
That's one way to look at it. Cutter suggests we need to be more consistent. Either color and shape are both objective or they're both subjective.
So the world is either filled with objective colors and shapes, or both are just in our minds.
That's the core idea. And the dual referent theory could handle this. It could say that our words for color and shape, they refer to both subjective qualities in our minds and objective properties in the world that cause those experiences.
So our visual experience has both subjective colors and shapes, and those are linked to objective properties out in the world. It's a two-way street between inner experience and the outside world.
Exactly. And that leads us to another big color theory that tries to bridge this gap: dispositionalism.
Ah, dispositionalism. Fill me in on how that one works again.
Dispositionalism says that colors are dispositions or potentialities. They're about what objects can do to us, the experiences they can cause under certain conditions. It's not quite as simple as saying colors are subjective feelings or objective properties.
So it's not that my mug is blue, but that it has the potential to make me see it as blue when I look at it in normal daylight.
You got it. It's about the tower to cause an experience, not about the object itself being colored.
That does capture the fact that seeing color involves both the object and the person seeing it.
Right. Dispositionalism tries to find a balance between saying color is all in our heads and saying it's all in the object.
Okay, makes sense. But if I remember right, there were some issues with dispositionalism too, weren't there?
You got a good memory. There are a couple of big ones. First, there's what we call the phenomenological problem.
Okay, lay that one on me. What's the problem here?
It's basically asking, do colors actually look like dispositions? Like, when you see a red apple, does it feel like you're seeing something that has the power to cause an experience in you? Or does it feel like you're seeing a simple, real property of the apple?
Good point. I don't look at an apple and think, oh, that has the potential to make me see red. I just red.
It's a strong intuition, right? Philosopher Colin McGinn, he argues that this directness of our color experience is a problem for dispositionalism. He says colors just don't appear to us as dispositions. They seem like qualities of the things themselves.
So do dispositionalists just say we're wrong about how we experience color?
Not necessarily. Janet Levin, another philosopher, she has a response to this. She argues that our visual experience actually can be about dispositions, even if we don't realize it consciously. Like when you see a glass of water, you're seeing its ability to quench your thirst, even if you don't think about that specifically.
Okay, so even though it feels direct, maybe there's a deeper level of perception going on that is about dispositions.
That's Levin's argument. But there's another challenge for dispositionalism, and it's one we've run into before: the circularity problem.
Oh yeah, that's a classic. How does that apply to color, though?
It comes up in how we define color as a disposition. If we say red is whatever has the power to make you see red, well, we're kind of going in circles.
Right, because then you'd have to explain what seeing red means, and we're right back where we started.
Exactly. So the trick is to define color dispositionally without creating that loop.
So how do dispositionalists try to break out of that circle?
They've come up with a few strategies. One is to rethink what looks red actually means. Another is to define the disposition itself in a way that avoids the circularity.
Any promising solutions out there?
Christopher Peacock, remember him? He has an interesting idea. He adds a third property into the mix, a sensational property. So instead of just saying red is what makes you see red, he introduces red, which stands for the feeling of red that you experience.
So we've got the object with the disposition, we've got the experience of seeing it, and we've got this separate red feeling. Got it.
Exactly. And that red helps break the loop. It gives us a way to talk about the experience of red without just referring back to red itself.
That's pretty clever, adding an extra layer to the explanation to make it work.
It's one way to tackle the problem. But even with that solution, dispositionalism still has another hurdle to clear, and it's a familiar one.
Let me guess, it's those normal observers and standard conditions popping up again.
It mailed it. Remember Hurton's argument that there's no objective way to say what's normal when it comes to seeing? That comes back to bite dispositionalism, too.
It's like the philosophical equivalent of whack-a-mole. Every time we think we've solved the problem, it pops up somewhere else. If we can't agree on what norma is, how can we build a whole theory on it?
It's a big challenge. Maybe we need a more radical solution, something that embraces the fact that color perception is variable and relative instead of trying to make it fit a fixed standard.
Okay, bring on the radical solutions. What's next?
Well, that leads us to color relationalism. This view flips the whole script, saying color isn't a property of objects at all. Instead, it's a relationship between the object, the person, and the whole context.
Okay, now that's a mind bender. Color as a relationship. I've got to hear this. All right, color relationalism, hit me with it. You said it's all about relationships, not properties. That's pretty out there.
It is, right, but it's a view that's gaining ground. Jonathan Cohen, he's a big name in this. He argues there's no such thing as blue or red in any absolute way.
Wait, blue doesn't exist. That's a bold statement.
It sounds crazy, I know, but what he means is what we see as blue or red is always relative. It depends on who's looking, what they're looking at, and the whole situation.
So instead of saying this is blue, I should be saying this looks blue to me right now under these lights.
That's the gist, yeah. It gets wordy, but it's more accurate to how color actually works. Cohen's big argument, he calls it the master argument. It's all about how much our color perception can change.
Oh yeah, tell me about it. I've bought clothes that look totally different at home compared to in the store. Lighting is everything.
Exactly. And it's not just the lighting, it's also about your eyes, your past experiences, even your culture can all affect how you see color.
So it's not just physics, it's psychology and culture too. Color is way more complex than I thought.
It really is. And Cohen's point is, if we accept that color perception is this variable, there's no reason to pick one perception as the true color.
Like there's no right way to see a sculpture because your view of it changes as you walk around it.
Perfect analogy. Color relationalism shifts the focus. It's not about the object, it's about the whole relationship between the object, the person seeing it, and everything else going on.
Okay, I get the concept, but it still feels strange. If it's all relational, what about that feeling of redness or blueness? That seems so basic, so real.
That's a good point. Relationalists might say that the feeling of redness isn't about seeing a property. It's more like a response that our brain creates in relation to certain input. Like the feeling of hot isn't really in the chili pepper, it's your taste buds reacting to it.
So instead of what is red, it's how do we experience red?
You got it. And this shift in focus, it leads to another set of theories that try to connect the objective and the subjective, what's out there and what we experience. We call them action-based theories.
Action-based theories? Okay, bring it on. What's the action part?
These theories say that color is kind of a mix, a dynamic thing between us, the world, and how we act when we're proceeding.
So it's not just sitting there and absorbing information. It's about actively interacting with the world to see color.
Right. One example is Evan Thompson's ecological view. He says colors are relational, but they're tied to what we can do, our sensory and motor skills.
So the color of a flower isn't just about its pigments, it's also about how a bee sees it, how a human interacts with it.
Exactly. The color is about both the object and the organism, how it perceives and acts in the world.
Like the color of a cliff for a mountain goat is about how the goat can climb it, not just the rock itself.
Perfect example. And Thompson's point is this isn't just dispositionalism or saying we're always wrong about color. It's about this dynamic relationship between us and the environment.
This really changes how we think about color. It's not just sitting there waiting to be discovered. It's about the whole interaction.
It's much more dynamic, for sure. Then there's Shalvin Noé. He has this inactive approach. He borrows from J.J. Gibson, who was all about movement and action and perception. We don't passively see, we actively explore the world to understand it.
So we move around an object, touch it, play with it, and that helps us see its color more fully.
That's the idea. Noé says color is relational. It comes from this back and forth between the object, our bodies, and the world. He talks about perspectival properties, things that change based on where you're standing and what you're doing.
Like how a building looks different depending on where you are and how you move around it.
Exactly. Noé says color works like that too. It's not fixed. It changes as we interact with the object.
So the color isn't just a label, it's this whole process that unfolds as we explore the world.
Right on. And these action-based theories, they really challenge us to move beyond the old subjective versus objective debate. They show how our bodies and actions are part of how we see color.
These action theories are really making me rethink things. Color isn't just something that happens to me, it's something I actively participate in.
That's the cool thing about philosophy. It makes you question even the most basic stuff. And the best part, even after all this time debating color, there's still so much more to discover.
I'm definitely feeling the wonder, that's for sure. This whole deep dive has shown me how much depth there is to something I see all the time. And it's amazing how many different ways there are to think about color. It's like a whole rainbow of theories.
That's the beauty of philosophy. It's not about finding the answer. It's about exploring all the different possibilities.
As a philosopher, it's amazing to see how something so simple can lead to such big questions. It makes you wonder what other everyday things are hiding philosophical secrets.
The world's full of them. It's all about staying curious and questioning even the stuff we think we know. And to you, our listener, keep that curiosity alive. There's a whole world of color out there waiting to be explored.